Hello, Somerville. My name is Ed Halloran. Welcome to the Somerville Labor Show. I guess it's been months since we've been on the air, and I want to thank you very much for, we have subscribers on YouTube. We also have people that watch us on Somerville Media Center regularly, and I missed all of you. I hope you missed me. I hope you missed Greg Hill, who's here with us. I also have, who's our assistant producer, by the way, I have Yvette Wilks, who is here with us. She also has a show on SMC, Somerville Media Center, called What's the Word? And it's a great show. You have to tune in because Yvette works really hard and she's doing it for a really long time. So when we first began this show in 2018, we were discussing labor. And now it's just kind of flipped a little bit. And it's almost like we're talking about climate change a little bit more than we were before. And now climate change and labor are almost joined as one. It's just like really pretty amazing. So then at this time, we began to discuss climate change more frequently. So what's happened here is that I had a friend of mine, Larry Yu, contacted me, and he asked me if I would be interested in watching a film and take part in a panel discussion. And at the beginning, when I thought about it, I'm like, well, I'm happy to go. I haven't seen the film. I don't really know what the film's about. But if someone's going to invite me for something to eat and hang out, and talk to a bunch of other people, I'm cool with it. I'm going, So we did, and it was a film, and the name was called Snow Money. And as a municipal worker, of course, it piques my interest because when you're talking about snow, that's pretty much how a lot of us at the Department of Public Works here in Somerville make our money to kind of balance us out for the year and all of that. So, I thought it was kind of exciting. I said, okay, I got no problem, I'll do that. So the film is shown at the Growing Center, which is located, it's a really beautiful garden located on Vinyl Avenue, and put together really well by Lisa B. I have to say Lisa B because I'm really going to have a hard time pronouncing the name, but she's great. Friends of the Community Growing Center Board, and also she's also the vice president as well. I also want to mention that the film was sponsored by the Growing Center and the Climate Coalition, and thanks to the SCC member as well, who is Lee Myrna as well. This brings me to our guest, and one other thing I want to say is about she's also a producer, a director, a filmmaker, camera person. I know that because I talked to you about this before, and I guess she did just about everything in this film. Kristen Chin, thank you very much. I'm very excited to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So I'm going to read a little bit of your background because I always like to ask people who they are, what they're all about, and you were gracious to come on the show. I really appreciate it. You're a journalist, a filmmaker, and always love storytelling and writing and telling true, intimate stories that inspire and connect with people. Mm-hmm. You spent 2 years at GBH Boston. I love that. I love GBH. I watch it all the time. As a largest public TV and radio station, as a production assistant and freelance, and pursue your own career and projects on the side. Most recently, you've been writing and the Neiman storyboard and working on the distribution of my first short film, Snow Money, an intimate portrait of how climate change impacts snowplower living and working in Boston. I'm also a real estate investor and an actress, and everything I do is tied into my passions for project management and narrative storytelling that inspires me and engages me. Prior to that, I was also published in the Boston Globe and featured on Stories from Stage, nationally broadcasted storytelling show on PBS on May 2021, and you earned your master's in journalism from Boston University. That's a mouthful.
Yep, that's me.
Welcome. Welcome to the show. So I guess my first question is, you could have made a film about just about anything, right? Why did you choose this particular subject and climate change, and what brought you to do that?
Yeah, so in my undergraduate, I studied environmental policy. And when I left college, I knew that I didn't want to go into research or activism or consulting, which were the jobs that I saw at that time. And so I kind of put my degree aside for a little bit, and that's when I discovered journalism and my love of storytelling. And at the end of my graduate program, I was talking to my advisor about what I should do for my capstone, and he was like, you should really make use of your undergraduate degree and do something in climate reporting. And so we thought about it, and he was like, you know, I've never seen anything from the perspective of a snowplower before. And I did some investigating, and I was like, wow, like he's right. I've really never seen anything aside from the story of like Snowmageddon, or when there's a really big storm and someone interviews a plower and they're like, wow, so much snow. And it's like, but we never actually get to see what a day in the life of someone who does that for a living is like, and how they might be impacted by climate change when they're some of the frontline people who would be impacted by climate change. So from there, I did more research into the industry, and I just found it to be a really fascinating industry. I love that there's so much risk and reward. There's so much preparation. It's so technical. I also loved that it was a challenge. I called people for a couple of months, like 2 or 3 months, before I actually found someone who would speak with me. And there also really isn't that much research about, I mean, I'll share more when I introduce the film later, but the industry report that I got was from 2016, and I know they came out with a new one for 2022, but there's really not that much research about the snowplow industry out there. So I love that it's this story that not many people think about or know that much about, and it's really an opportunity to learn about a new perspective.
So tell me a little bit about how you, the contractor, the carpenter named Joe, he has his own business.
Yeah.
How did you end up meeting him? I mean, you know, it's just, you finally found somebody.
Finally, oh my gosh, it took a couple of months of calling, and I would just go onto Google and I typed in like snowplowers in Boston, snowplowers in Greater Boston, and I would just go one after the other and calling them and saying, here's what I'm working on. Is this something that you're interested in or open to? And if not, I just informationally interview them. And I even started filming with someone at one point, and then I stopped. It was just really challenging to coordinate with him, so I ended up not working with him. And then I was about to give up after like 2 months of calling people when I happened to be on the neighborhood networking platform Nextdoor. Are you familiar with that?
No.
It's basically like the neighborhood bulletin where everyone can post about anything and say what's happening in their neighborhood. And someone posted about Joe's snowplowing services, and I was like, what the heck? I'm about to give up anyways. Might as well just call him, see what there is. And he ended up spending about half an hour just talking to me on the phone. And I was like, this is my guy. Like, I got to go out and meet him. So I did. And he was just so open about what he was up to and so generous with his life and his sharing. And I mean, if I'm being completely honest, he was the only person who was really willing to let me film him as well.
Well, I saw the film, so I think you really lucked out.
I did.
Because I think he was a really a very nice gentleman, sweet guy.
Very likable.
Yeah, very likable and a hard worker.
Yep.
Passionate about what he does, obviously. So when you were filming and you began to know more and more about Joe and his business and his family, what were you learning about him during this time? What exactly was it that you began to find out?
Yeah, so the first time I met him, I just asked him about, like, how do you structure your business? Have you felt the impacts of climate change? What's that been like for you? What has COVID been like for you? And I think what I was present to most when I was interviewing Joe was, like, his love of his family and his community. And that really, really stood out to me, particularly, like, his dream. He's 30. And he has a dream of, you know, having a house for his daughter. And he just, like, he loves his friends a lot, and a lot of them will work with him on different jobs and stuff, but just to see how close-knit he is with his family and his community, that really stood out to me.
Well, I want to say, we this is just a little bit of an opening of what we're about to see. So I'm really excited to air this. This is Kristen's allowing us to air this for the first time here, one time. And as time goes on, we will get this right, and we hope that we can begin to show it more frequently. But this is just like it's really like a debut of this. It's a short film, but it hits home, in my opinion. So what I'd like you to do is, I want you to watch the film, but before you do, I'd like Kristen just to give us an overview of this film in itself, and if you could, please.
Absolutely. So do you want me to look at the camera when I do
Sure,
this, or okay? So according to the Snow and Ice Management Association, nearly 80% of the 110,400 estimate snow and ice industry operators were sole proprietors in 2016. Of the operators' average revenue, approximately 76% went to covering costs. And unlike large businesses, sole proprietors are at higher risk of being impacted by changing winter weather conditions. Snow Money follows Joe, a 31. I told you earlier he's
That's
30.
okay.
A 31-year-old father and sole proprietor who lives and works in Greater Boston and the surrounding areas. Seeking to establish his independence and provide for his family, Joe wants to save enough money to buy his first home. Intimate and authentic, this narrative short documents the impact of more severe, unpredictable, and wetter winter weather on Joe and his journey. This film intends to give a fresh perspective on a highly covered topic that connects homeowners, city dwellers, and suburban residents to the real-world impacts of climate change on everyday people. Its creators hope that by doing so, Snow Money will inspire communities of all backgrounds to protect our environment and present and future generations.
Thank you. Well stated.
Yeah.
So here's what's happening. We want to make sure that you guys have that opportunity to watch the preview of Snow Money. And at some point in time, we are going to be showing the full film going further. So please check out the preview, and then we'll be back for our conversation.
Hi, honey. Oh, I love you. My baby.
I live in the basement of my mom's house with my girlfriend Franny, but I want a bigger space and I want a room for my 10-year-old daughter who visits a few times a week.
I am a carpenter, full-time builder, I would say, and in the winter we do snow plowing. I was hoping to be buying a house like right about now.
But there's definitely some unpredictability with the snow.
I've learned that the hard way a couple times. Like, can't count on snow money. You can be ready to make some money in the snow and be as prepared as you want, but if it doesn't snow, you're not making any money.
So let me just ask this question: when you watched the finished product of the film for the very first time, what were your thoughts on the effects of climate change and how it affects labor in general?
My thoughts on the effects of climate change and how it affects labor is that it's not super obvious in some ways. Like, I think it's and even for Joe, over the course of the film, at the very end, you can hear him saying, I'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Mm. And so in some ways, it's like, it's not here yet, like the severe, more unpredictable, wetter winter weather is kind of here, but I think it would be easy to also say we still have some pretty good snowstorms that aren't so bad, right. And we're still getting by. I think that's the thing, we're still getting by. And so I think in terms of labor, what I really wanted to show was that it impacts everyday people mm-hmm. in everyday ways. Like for Joe, and one of the reasons why I really thought he would be such a great subject is that he is dealing with something that everyone can relate to, which is mm-hmm. You want to provide for your family, especially your kids. And I just think climate change is going to make that more challenging for people, and we're going to have to get even more creative with the ways that we make money, sustain our businesses, particularly for a small business owner like Joe.
I remember towards the end of the film, he was really frustrated. Yeah. And he was thinking about it because, look, I understand what snow plowing is all about, obviously. Yeah. And you have good seasons and you have bad seasons.
Yes.
You've got Snowmageddon, right? 120 inches can fall in a matter of 4 weeks, right? And then you've got 18 inches of snow in a single year.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying at the end something like, well, I don't know, maybe I'll just sell my equipment, and that'll, and
Actually,
leave
so
off.
I just talked to Joe on the phone the other day, and he told me that he changed the structure of his business after I made the film. And before, earlier in the film, you'll see like 70% of my accounts are pay by storm. Well, he shifted so that everything is now pay by season. And he's actually lost a lot of his residential customers because they don't want to pay in case it doesn't snow.
Exactly.
So a lot of his customers, which is kind of what I was and what consultants I spoke to predicted, is that you're going to see small business owners kind of rolling up their businesses and either working for larger companies or working for people who can or like a large commercial entity that can budget for something like a pay by season.
A lot of that's happening. Unfortunately, when we first started doing this show, it was all about labor, as I said before, and then it became climate change pretty quickly. Just came in really fast, and the film does hit home because we do depend on that. It's money. It's not really extra money because of COVID and the way things have tripled so quickly. It's just really, really expensive for everybody. So, a lot of people that I work with, we feel what Joe is feeling, and and we don't even own the company. We work for the city.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, actually having a plow driver, and people who are dealing with snow, removing snow, to them it looks pretty amazing when you see it. To us, it's just like you're up 24, 48 straight hours, and it's just second nature.
Yeah.
And you're just moving. It's like you're in your sleep moving, like walking in your sleep, and you're doing it. But it's really a test of.
When I went out to film with Joe at like 3 in the morning, because he had the heater on and the truck was like swaying back and forth, and it was so hard not to fall asleep. I was
Oh yeah, it's brutal. It's terrible.
It was really tough.
You were riding shotgun with Joe. Oh, I like that. Well, you know what? It's pretty amazing stuff when you see it out there. When you're in a storm like that, and you see the way it falls, like 3 inches an hour, that fast, it can be a little scary at times, especially at night. But really a great movie. I guess what is it? What other projects are you doing right now that you may want to give us a little plug on? Are you working on?
Yeah, well, I really want to take this series and expand it, and I'm actually starting to work on another project about work and climate change with another, one of the grants that funded the film called the Pulitzer Center. They put out a call for more proposals on the impacts of climate change on work, but in other countries like the African continent, parts of Asia, and South and Central America. And so one of the things that I'm looking at right now is how is the Asian diaspora in Central and South America impacted by climate change, and specifically their food and culture. So that's one project that I'm working on. And then I also want to do another project that captures the impacts of climate change on work in the Northeast as well. Another kind of take on the same subject, but with a different, like someone else who works with their hands, who isn't a snowplower but does another line of work.
I'm sure that, look at this, there's probably plenty out there. You're in a city where there's construction constantly. We have 2 daunting buildings behind us right here in Union Square.
Yeah.
So there's a lot.
They're big.
Yeah, they're big. There's a lot going on. We have a lot of science centers. We're under construction for the past 20 years here. So it's pretty amazing. So you have an undergraduate degree in environmental policy, right? So we're in the midst of we have been in the midst of climate change. So how can we prepare better for, as a community? How can communities prepare better for this?
Oh my gosh.
In your opinion?
Yeah.
At this time.
In my opinion, I think one of the most powerful things that we can do is continue to talk about climate change, but in the present, because I think and even for me, just as the average person walking around, it's like we're getting by. And it's so hard to think about what the city could look like, 30, 50 years out. And it's something that, as a human being, I just don't want to confront either. And I think it's really important to keep alive the conversation of climate change and also be looking at solution-oriented conversations too, rather than doom and gloom, which is really I know the film kind of ends on a slightly negative but also open-ended note.
Yeah.
But also I really didn't want this to be like a science, like a lot of facts and doom and gloom. Like that was really not the intention. It was really to say, hey, climate change is impacting people now, and it's everyday people who live in your in your neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Climate change has been happening for years. And when I was a young boy, I remember the summers just seemed so much colder, so much snow. And over the years, yeah, it has. It's somewhat decreased until obviously 2015, and that was an insane kind of a year when that happened. I know that did you do the filming for all of this?
Almost, yeah, actually. Well, no, almost. I did all of the filming except for the interviews that I had with Joe.
Okay.
I asked one of my colleagues at the Boston University journalism program, Damian Burkhart, to help me film. He just, managed the camera when we were interviewing Joe. But other than that, I did it all myself.
Well, I have a camera person, if you want, right here in the studio, Greg Hill.
Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I really need to give credit to my editor, Jorge Garcia. He's an editor in Brooklyn, New York, and
Jorge Garcia? Okay,
yeah.
Absolutely.
And he just made the footage, and the people that he worked with, the sound and color editors, made the footage look so much better than it looked after I'd filmed it.
Well, you know what happens when you're a talking head?
Yeah.
You just depend on people who sit there and they help you and they try and make things so much better. And I know when we talked, you were struggling, saying, I can't do this. This is a daunting task. I can't do this all by myself.
Yeah.
I need other people to help. So really putting a team together, I think really made all the difference, right?
Oh my goodness. I can't even, so I worked on the film for about a year by myself, and I did the editing myself. I did all the shooting and audio, and I was so frustrated by the end. I felt like I was running around in circles or running into the same wall over and over again. No matter how I edited it, the film just did not look right. And so I was like, I need to go get help. And I looked on Fiverr.com, which is where a lot of freelancers post their services. And I reached out to a couple of editors who looked like their work looked interesting. Jorge was one of them. And I did it in different price ranges. And Jorge was in a price range that I really couldn't afford.
Oh, hey, it's always the way.
Yeah, so I contacted him and was like, hey, here's what I'm working on. I really can't afford you, but I'll pay you, I plan to pay for this myself, so I'll pay you what I can. Would that work for you? And he said, why don't you just send it to me? And so I sent him what I had, and he was like, this actually looks really interesting. I'm happy to work with you on it. And then I started finding other team members just through Facebook and stuff. So I also have a film festival director, Emma Pict, a social media director, Monica Silverio. I had a production assistant, TK Kim. And all of them were just amazing and so ready to work on the film for free. And so I was going with this for a little while, and then I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was like, Kristen, it's really uncool to ask people to work for free. And I realized
now they tell me.
That is really uncool. I think artists should be paid, and so I should be living that myself in my life. So I was like, okay, I got to go out and get money. And then I applied for all these different grants at the Brookline Interactive Group, at different cultural councils, including the Cambridge Cultural Council and the Chicopee Cultural Council, and also the Pulitzer Center, of course. And then they all ended up, I applied to many more, but those were the ones that got back to me. And I went to friends and family and told them what I was up to and was like, can you please help me? And I ended up almost raising $10,000 to fund the film. And I was able to pay myself back for the time and the money I'd spent on equipment, and also pay everyone at least an honorarium. And then I worked out one person was a graduate student, so helping her get the
Well, that's ambition,
credits.
I tell you. We need a little bit of that. I need a little bit of that myself.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for that. That's an amazing story. So I want to share something with you about, we've been preparing here in Somerville for a little bit too, with Somerville Stands Together. And I had Craig Altimos on the show, and he was with Mass 350 at the time, and Rand Wilson, who was at that time the chief of staff from the SEIU. And we just kept getting these ideas, and people coming on the show talking about climate change and labor, and how do we blend them together? How do we mesh them together and get them to both work together. And Joe Uline got me so excited about it. I said, you know what, Rand, why can't you and Craig right now, make a pledge to take labor and take climate change, and let's work together on one common goal, right? And that is to look at these green jobs, look at a way to transition jobs that are not green into green jobs, and come up with maybe our own, green New Deal here in Somerville. So with Greg and a lot of other, and also, Greg Hill and Craig and Rand and everybody, they just came up with this, and it's really pretty amazing. And we got a little stuck for a little while there. I'm hoping that we can have a reopener on it, but I think it's great. It's just pretty amazing what we came up with, and we made a pitch to the city councils. We made a pitch to the mayor, who was running at the time, who is now the mayor, and she has her own, obviously has her own plan. I mean, Mayor Curtatone at the time had something called Further Forward, whatever it was something like Further Forward, and then we did Shovel Ready, so we kind of put them both together like that and just kind of boxed it up. So
teamwork makes the dream work.
Well, we're excited. It's pretty exciting for us.
Awesome.
So I want to share one thing with you. And there were 3 people on the panel. I was lucky enough to be one of them, which we're going to show some of that at some point. And there's a piece of equipment it's called the LaRue, L-A-R-U-E, but all of the young kids out there were calling it the Beast. It's a beast, right? So it's this big piece of equipment. It's a front end loader with a gigantic snowblower attached to it, and it could load a truck in a matter of 3 or 4 minutes with snow. And when we saw it in 2015, we were really surprised when they brought it in. They brought in 2 of them. We're looking at it, we're going, when are we ever going to use this thing? For what would how would we get that down the street in Somerville, these small streets? Sure enough, right after the Super Bowl, I remember it, bang, 20 inches, 25, 30. I mean, these storms it was like 9 degrees. I mean, it was like the snow was just hitting the ground and coming right back up.
Yeah.
And to me, that's severe climate change. That's really amazing. So I'm going to show a quick clip, about a minute, of that we have here, of the LaRue loading a truck. I might be driving it. It might be one of my co-workers. I don't know. Take a look. Okay, I hope you like that. That's a pretty decent piece of equipment that we have there. So we're getting close to the end, but I wanted to share a couple of things, a couple observations, and some things that some of the people said. We have a therapist, Joel Hoffman, and she was mentioning, they were asking her about, about the changes, the climate change and how it's affecting her and what she sees. And she said that the increase in flooding brings an increase in more mildew and mold, greatly affecting those with chronic lung conditions. There's no longer just an allergy season anymore. It's more of it's all the time.
Yeah.
It's just one of those kind of things. Non-smokers too are getting COPD, and that's from the environment.
Wow.
Yeah. So she was really, been around for a long time doing this. And also increase in COPD, et cetera, it's linked to the increased highway particles as well, which here in Somerville on Mystic Avenue, which is right next to Route 93, we did a show on that with a guy named Professor Doug Brugge, and he talked about this and did extensive studies on a lot of this. And is it climate change? Well, I think we probably if we could get more electric vehicles out there, we could probably maybe get to carbon neutral someday. Here in Somerville, we were looking at 2030, 35. Whether or not that's going to happen, we don't know. But we set a goal. They set it for 2050. We said, how about 15 years sooner? So we're hoping for that. Also, Emilio Cruz from the Welcome Project, he says in the area of climate change, there were not many minorities involved in climate change. He mentioned that. He says people who ought to be involved in the process of climate change initiatives are minorities, immigrants, et cetera, that are most affected by climate change. What do you think about that? What's your thought on it? I
would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think about like some of the coastal communities in Boston, they're mostly people of color. They're going to be heavily impacted by sea level rise.
Absolutely.
And I also think that, like, you know, it's really, one of the reasons why I chose to work with Joe was that he was a person of color, and I found that very unique in the snow plowing industry. And I just think representation is really, really important, and that we bring all voices to the table.
Well, you're right. It is most affected because people who don't have the education needed, who have to really work, fall into labor, intense duties, physical labor.
Yes.
I'm one of those people. It's fine. You get used to it. You learn to work with it. You deal with it, and I think there's a turnaround now. It's happening. Labor is finally getting its recognition. It's getting its due, and it should. And unions, and that's why we have the show. We always want more people to be in unions to get the respect that they deserve, to get the wages they deserve, to get the proper working conditions and the safety conditions that they need to work under. And that's why we respect unions, and that why we always would like to see people, have that ability and have that opportunity to get into a union, So I want to thank you so much for being on the show. This is eye-opening for me. We try to keep it under half an hour, but I never do. And sometimes they get mad at me about that. But I like to be casual and have a conversation. But I do want to thank you. Do you have any questions for me?
I do. I'll ask you
good.
after the show, though.
After the show.
Yeah.
All right.
They're about.
So anyway, I want to thank you very much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Kristen Chin, this has been great for me. This is my first show back in a long time. I enjoy it. And of course, Greg Hill is here. Greg takes a lot of photos, and Greg is a tremendous help to me when it comes to getting guests on the show. He is always getting in touch with people, and I really do appreciate that. And Yvette Wilks has a show called What's the Word? If you haven't seen it, please watch it. I have to mention the Hip Hop Festival too. So that's coming 2023, so watch out for that one. Thank you very much. And unity there is strength. Peace. Okay, I want to thank all of you. Thank you, Somerville. In unity there is strength. I want to thank our guest, Kristen Chin, for being so gracious. And as we always say in Somerville with the SMEA, Somerville Municipal Employees Association, in unity there is strength. Wait to see you next time.